The pen felt heavier than it should have, but my hand didn't shake. I signed the deed with the kind of calm that only comes from waiting too long for something you were never supposed to have. They didn't know. No one knew. That made it feel even better. The woman across the table, a notary with a name tag that read Lynn, handed me a copy and smiled like it was just another Tuesday. And for her, maybe it was. But for me, this moment was years in the making. Quiet, simple, no champagne, no clapping. Just a paper, my name, and a house they didn't think I'd ever own. I used every cent I'd saved, down to the penny. Bartending, side gigs, selling my car, and riding the bus for months just to scrape it together. But it was mine. A voice inside me whispered, "Nobody's going to hand you what you've earned. You've got to take it." And so I did. This house wasn't just brick and wood. It was the one I'd sat on the porch of every summer as a little girl, sipping lemonade Grandma made from real lemons, not the powdered kind. It was where she taught me how to pull weeds by the root, and that silence is sometimes the best answer. This wasn't real estate. It was legacy. By the time I pulled into the cracked driveway, the sun was stretching low across the sky, staining everything in gold. I got out and stood there a while. Just stood. The wraparound porch needed sanding. The paint peeled in quiet rebellion. That old oak out front was taller than I remembered. I walked up the steps. They creaked under my weight like they remembered me. The key slid in with a soft click. The kind you only notice when your heart is too loud in your ears. Inside, the smell hit me first. Lavender, dust, old wood, like time had held its breath. I moved through the house room by room. My hand brushed the hallway wall, the same wall I used to race my hand along as a kid. In the kitchen, the sun caught the old tile just right, and I remembered Grandma laughing, her hands dusted in flour, telling me to keep my elbows off the table if I wanted to grow up decent. In the back room, a drawer stuck halfway out, like someone had tried to close it in a hurry. Inside was a linen handkerchief. Mine. My initials, embroidered in blue. I'd forgotten about it, but the house hadn't. I stood there holding that piece of fabric like it held the last thread of who I used to be. Funny how a house can remember more than people. Memories came flooding back, some soft, others sharp. Thanksgiving, 10 years ago. I was 23, still sitting at the kids' table while my brothers and cousins, all younger than me, were served wine with the adults. I had asked once why I was still there. My mother had laughed. "Don't make things awkward, Georgia." That was the tone. Always the tone. I learned fast. The more you ask, the more they remind you you're not supposed to. One year, I overheard them whispering in the den, my name and will, in the same sentence. I asked Dad what they meant. He looked at me like I'd heard it wrong, like I was being dramatic. "You imagine things," he said. "Let grown folks handle grown folks' matters." So I stopped asking. But I never forgot. That silence they fed me? I learned to digest it. And now, I was full. As I brought in a box from the car, a voice startled me. "Didn't think your parents would sell this place." I turned. The neighbor from 2 doors down, Mrs. Duncan, I think her name was, stood in her front yard, watering a patch of dying azaleas. She smiled like it was just small talk. My spine stiffened. "I didn't think so either," I said, polite. "Not too warm." She nodded, looked away. I closed the trunk and took my time walking back up the steps. I hadn't told anyone, not even my best friend. Not even a whisper on social media. How did she know? Or maybe the real question was, who told her? Was this house ever really up for sale in the eyes of my parents? Did they know I bought it? Did they try to stop it? I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the light change, waiting for that tight feeling in my chest to soften. It didn't. Later, I opened the mailbox, expecting dust. Instead, I found an envelope. No return address, but the handwriting, familiar. It was addressed to my grandmother. But the postmark, last month, inside was a legal letter, probate court, and a handwritten note, just our 2 names, hers, mine. That quiet turned louder. They knew. They always knew. The living room was bare. The envelope trembled in my hands, though my fingers didn't. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, like I used to do in school assemblies, trying to look invisible. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I read every word. Twice. They buried this. Buried me. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Not when someone like me starts digging. I didn't sleep. I laid there most of the night with the envelope beside me on the floor, like it might start whispering answers if I stayed still enough. I must have read my name and hers 100 times. Same paper, same ink, still didn't make sense. There's an old saying my grandmother used to tell me, usually when I was asking too many questions. Don't go digging for bones unless you're ready to find skeletons. But I wasn't a kid anymore. And this wasn't about curiosity. It was about clarity. I thought about calling my parents right then. Wake them up, hear their voices shift under pressure. But something in me said no. Not yet. Not without more. By morning, I'd made coffee that tasted like regret and climbed up to the attic. The dust was thick, like time had been waiting for me to open something I wasn't supposed to. Boxes everywhere, some falling apart, others too neat. Old photo albums. Ones I remembered flipping through as a girl, watching adults toast champagne I wasn't allowed to taste. Then a pile of greeting cards, birthdays, graduations, most addressed to people other than me. I found one with my name, never opened, never mailed. Postmarked 15 years ago. I pressed on. In the corner, half buried beneath a crocheted blanket, was a faded green folder marked Estate. Her handwriting, clear as daylight. It was empty. That felt intentional. Just below it, a stack of documents, utility bills, receipts, and tucked in, barely visible, a few yellowed pages. Scribbled in the margins was my grandmother's cursive, familiar, and rushed. She wrote notes like she spoke, direct and full of underlines. The words hit me like a slap. Georgia is not to be left out. I froze. A draft? A fragment? It didn't matter. It was real. Someone had tried to erase her. I heard my phone buzz downstairs, left it charging in the kitchen overnight. I wasn't in the mood for people, but I climbed down to check. It was Arlene. I didn't answer. A moment later, the call picked up by itself. I didn't touch anything. The line was open, and then I heard voices. My parents. Clear as if they were in the room. I didn't even breathe. Just lucky she didn't find it sooner, my father's voice said. Then my mother. You promised me we burned everything. Silence. She wasn't supposed to find that letter. I stood still, one hand on the kitchen counter. Not suspicion. Confirmation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, signed and sealed. They never intended for me to know. I wanted to scream, to call them back and let it all pour out. But I didn't. I turned off the phone and placed it gently on the counter, like it might explode if I moved too fast. If they thought I was in the dark, I'd keep it that way. I walked back to the attic, but now I wasn't looking for memories. I was gathering evidence. I started a notebook. Photographed every document, took notes, scanned signatures. Every drawer, every paper got a second look. Grandma once told me, the truth always has a way of floating up, like oil on water. I used to think she meant it to comfort me. Maybe it was a warning. Around mid-morning, I called Naomi. My best friend since middle school. We hadn't talked in weeks. Life does that. I didn't give her names, just details. She didn't ask who. You've always been the fixer, she said. Maybe it's time you let something break. That one sentence made my throat tight. She wasn't telling me to blow things up. She was telling me to stop carrying everything like it was my fault if it fell apart. I hung up and looked around the room, my room now. The envelope sat beside stacks of scribbled notes and the faded handkerchief. This wasn't a place anymore. It was a crossroad. I laid it all out, literally. On the dining table, papers, photographs, receipts, notes, even the unopened card. I started a list. Probate office. An estate lawyer. Maybe even a private investigator. I didn't know if I'd follow through on all of it, but it gave me direction. And direction's a kind of power. I wasn't after revenge. I was after the truth. I woke up with the sound of their voices still echoing in my ears. That call, the one they never meant for me to hear, had settled into my bones like winter air. I stared at the ceiling, gripping the edge of the blanket like it might hold me steady. The envelope was still on the dresser. I picked it up again, running my thumb over the inked names. Hers. Mine. I opened it one more time, not expecting anything new, but needing to feel the paper again. The handwriting was hers, without a doubt. I'd seen enough birthday cards and grocery lists to know the way she looped her G's. If they thought I wouldn't recognize it, they didn't know me at all. I dressed slow, calm, but inside I was boiling. Not loud, not out of control, just steady heat. That quiet kind of fire that burns longer. I told myself one thing over and over. If they tried to bury the truth, they underestimated how deeply I remember. By 10:30, I was parked in front of the courthouse. The county records building was plain, tan brick, too many windows, smelled faintly of old carpet and copier ink. I walked up to the clerk's counter, trying to sound casual. "I'm looking for a will. My grandmother's, Lucille May Waverly." The woman behind the glass looked up at me like I'd just asked for state secrets. She tapped something on her keyboard and frowned. "We'd need a formal request for archived records. Processing takes a few days." "A few days?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I was told they were public documents." "They are," she replied, smiling thin. "But not all are digitized." I thanked her and stepped away, but I didn't leave. Instead, I moved toward the index shelf near the back wall and scanned the labeled binders. Years of filings, organized by date and surname. I flipped through the entries. Nothing under Waverly from 2020 to 2022. Nothing. There was a gap, like someone had wiped her name right off the books. I stood still, the binder open in my hands. That's when I heard someone call my name, soft but familiar. "Georgia?" I turned to see Ms. Eldora Finch, my grandmother's old neighbor, always in floral dresses and cat-eye glasses. She lived 3 doors down growing up. Always waved, always nosy. She stepped closer. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Just following up on a few things," I replied, guarded. She hesitated, glancing around, then leaned in. "You know, years ago, your grandmother said she was leaving the house to you. Said it plain as day on her porch one afternoon." My heart thudded once, hard. "But then, your mother told me she'd changed her mind. Said she'd taken care of it differently." I didn't question it. I stared at her. She lowered her voice more. "She asked me to shred some old papers once. I didn't look at them. I figured it was just junk." I didn't move. That was it. Confirmation. The lie wasn't just whispered, it was maintained. I thanked her and walked out before my knees gave. Back home, I climbed back into the attic. That folder, estate, was still there, half covered in a dusty quilt. I pulled it out again, opened it on the floor. There were documents, but not what I expected. Photocopies. At first glance, they looked ordinary. House deeds, bank letters, some legal notices. But as I flipped through them, I noticed the edges. Some pages were thicker, watermarked. Others were faded or copied at an angle. Then I saw it. 2 versions of the same page. One was typed, clean. The other, handwritten notes in the margins. The handwritten one looked older, and it had a line that stopped me cold. "Georgia, to receive full ownership of the property." It was underlined twice. The newer version. That sentence was gone. Deleted. Someone had edited my name right out of her last wishes. I sat there, floor creaking beneath me, hand gripping the edge of the folder like it might fly away. I wasn't crying. I was past that. This was betrayal sharpened into clarity. I couldn't go public yet, not without losing more. I pulled out my phone and texted Corinne. We hadn't talked in months, but she was a lawyer now, working in family law up in Charlotte. "Need to ask a few things. Private, not urgent, but soon." She replied in 5 minutes. "Of course, call when ready." I started gathering everything. Took photos, scanned pages, documented dates, not for show, for truth. Around 3:15, I saw something outside the front window. A white sedan, Mom's. She didn't stop, just drove past, slow. But a minute later, I heard footsteps. Someone stepped up onto the porch, didn't knock, didn't say a word, just stood there, then turned and left. I stayed quiet, hidden behind the curtain, holding that linen handkerchief she'd given me years ago. My initials stitched in navy thread. If they were watching, they already knew I was getting too close, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. I sat in the living room long after the door had closed behind Arlene. The clock ticked loud into the silence, but my mind replayed every word my mother said on that porch. She hadn't denied the will existed, just danced around it, twisted it into some kind of family strategy that left me outside looking in. My fingers found the old handkerchief still tucked in my pocket. I pressed it against my palm, grounding myself with the memory of her, my grandmother, the only one who ever made me feel seen in this family. I stared at the documents scattered across the coffee table, notes, copies, that envelope that started it all, and felt how shallow these fragments were. Not enough. Not yet. I needed more than guesses and innuendos. If they really went as far as altering the will, I had to be sure. So I went back to the attic. The sun was slipping low behind the trees, but I didn't bother with the light. I knew this place by heart now. The dust didn't bother me anymore. I moved the old suitcase, lifted the trunk lid, and pulled out the photo albums again. I flipped through each one slower this time, running my fingers along the bindings, the edges, the cardboard seams. One of the larger albums had a backing that felt off, thicker. I pulled at it gently, and the material peeled away. Tucked inside was a yellowed envelope, folded flat. No seal, just my name on the front in her handwriting. Inside was a letter. It was shaky, written in fountain pen, but it was her voice in every line. She talked about the years we spent on the porch together, the books we read, the way I always asked the hard questions. She said, "If you're reading this, then something's gone wrong. But don't doubt for a second what I intended. That house was yours, because you were the only one who ever saw it as more than real estate. You saw it as home." She wrote that she feared what fights might erupt if she was clear in the will, but she wanted me to have a place where I could always return. And now I knew for certain they didn't just hide something, they erased it. That evening, I drove out to my father's usual diner. No warning, just showed up. He was sitting at the counter with his newspaper folded in that same old way. I asked him calmly if we could talk. At first, he was all small talk and smiles, but when I mentioned the will, the room shifted. He didn't shout, didn't deny anything outright, just said, "Things change, families evolve." I asked him straight, "Was there ever a version where I was named?" He didn't answer, but when he stood to pay the bill, I saw a corner of a document sticking from his jacket pocket. My grandmother's name in faded ink, and below it, what looked like black marker striking through paragraphs. I didn't press. I thanked him for the coffee and left before my hands started shaking. Back home, the silence wrapped around me tighter than any blanket. I sat on the edge of the bed and let it come. The sting, the hollowness, the old memories of waiting at the window for someone to come home, only to be told later I'd been forgotten. Had they ever truly seen me as part of this family? Or was I just the one who made things inconvenient? But then I looked over at the letter. Her words weren't just comfort. They were instruction. If they wanted this buried, then I was going to make it impossible. I scanned every document, backed them up, photographed them twice. I called Corinne, this time not just to talk, but to schedule a real appointment. She gave me the name of a forensic expert, someone who could compare signatures, check ink age, and testify if it came to that. And I thought of Eldora. She remembered things, maybe more than she let on. Maybe it was time her memory became part of the record. By nightfall, I was back in the attic, standing among scattered files and torn bindings. I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. I was giving them a voice. I sat at my kitchen table that afternoon, the letter from my grandmother lying open beside my coffee cup, the copies of the altered will stacked in neat piles. The attic was quieter now, but my head was loud. For days, I'd been pulling threads, one after another, and now I had a handful of evidence that could strangle any lie. Corinne's face flickered on my laptop screen. We'd been speaking in low voices for an hour. She laid out the steps like a chess player, what we could file, who we might subpoena, which witnesses mattered most. I listened and took notes, my mind shifting from outrage to strategy. For years, I'd swallowed my words. This wasn't going to be one of those times. My stomach nodded, but my voice stayed steady. I wasn't just the girl at the kids' table anymore. I was the woman holding the receipts. Then the invitation came. A text from my mother. Family dinner at the community hall tonight. House blessing and reunion. It read, sweet, but landed sour. A trap dressed as tradition. My thumb hovered over decline, but instead I typed, I'll be there. Corinne raised an eyebrow on the screen, but I just said, if they want a stage, I'll bring the script. When I walked into the hall, the smell of pot roast and lemon cleaner hit me at once. The room buzzed with cousins, neighbors, people who had known me since I was a child but still looked through me like wallpaper. I chose a chair near the back. My mother smiled too brightly. My sister smirked at her phone. I stayed calm. The last time I walked into a room like this, I'd left crying. Not tonight. Halfway through dinner, my mother stood with a raised glass. To our daughter who kept this family together through hard times, she said, looking straight at Arlene. Applause. Heads turned. I set down my fork. My lips parted, but before I could speak, Arlene leaned toward me and murmured just loud enough, Nice of you to finally join us in your own house, Georgia. The words burned, but I didn't flinch. Inside my head, they want me small. Not today. Corinne slipped in quietly from the side door. We'd planned this. When the room settled, she walked to the front, a slim folder in hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said in that calm lawyer's voice, but I have information that concerns this family directly. She opened the folder and held up printed pages, the original will, forensic notes, signature analyses. These aren't rumors. These are records, pages removed, terms altered, this house and more. Gasps, shifting chairs. My uncle cleared his throat. My mother's face went pale, then red. I stood behind Corinne, silent but present. Vindication wasn't sweet. It was sharp. Seraphine, my aunt, rose with her hands trembling. You're out of line, Georgia, she hissed. You've been playing detective. You're tearing us apart. My mother clutched her napkin like a lifeline. You betrayed me, she said, voice cracking. I met her eyes. I didn't betray anyone. I asked for the truth. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some turned away. A few stared at me with something like respect. Others glared. I could feel both isolation and support flickering like a bad signal. I stepped closer to the table. My hands didn't shake anymore. I'm done waiting, I said quietly. Tomorrow, Corinne will file a notice of contest at the probate court. I didn't wait for their reaction. I placed the handkerchief back in my pocket, lifted my chin, and walked toward the door. Behind me was either applause or shock. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that for the first time in years, they were finally looking at me. I closed the door behind me and exhaled a long, quiet breath. The echoes of that night's confrontation still ring in my head, words scraped across that dining hall like coals. I walked past the living room where the chairs still hung with tension, shadows of unresolved glances. They thought I'd melt back into silence. They thought I'd fold, but they don't know me anymore. I sat on my sofa, let my evidence folder rest on the coffee table beside me. I reviewed every page, every note, watching my own name dance across typed margins and faded photocopies. I traced the faces who looked away at dinner, the ones who refused to meet my eyes. Standing up cost more than I ever let them see. Then my phone buzzed with a message from a number I once trusted. I froze. The screen lit. Sacrifice it all or lose what you still have. No signature, no context, a warning, a command. I stared. My heart thundered. Was it them? Someone else? Fear pressed in. But I didn't delete. I screenshotted. It became evidence. This wasn't just about documents or legal fights anymore. It was about protecting what remained. The battle lines had shifted. Later that evening, Something jagged cut through my thoughts, my name trending on my screen. The newsfeed swelled with a video clip. Seraphine had live-streamed a manipulated version of that night's conversation, my measured tone spliced with harsh captions, recast to look threatening and ungrateful. Viewers watched and judged. Comments. Why is she attacking her own family? She ungrateful. She's gone too far. I watched in horror, my words twisted into weapons. Trust shattered. Betrayal sharpened me. I wanted to respond on the spot, fire back, reclaim my voice. But I remembered Corinne's counsel. Let them build their case. You build yours. So I typed a short message. The truth always comes out. I'll share mine soon. No bite, no bitterness, just clarity. Then I got to work. I placed my grandmother's letter beside my laptop, lined up Corinne's forensic notes, the witness statements, the old envelopes. I tested the lighting, adjusted the camera, clear image, no glitches. I wrote my opening words on a sticky note, truth, not revenge. I said them soft to the empty room. The camera blinked to life, the screen glowed. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. For a long time, I had listened to the lies they told about me. Now, I was about to speak for myself. The room trembled with quiet tension as I checked the camera angle one last time. Documents lay spread around me, scans of altered wills, faded photographs, the original letter from Grandma, Corinne's notes, everything I had gathered to prove I wasn't just fighting shadows. I drew a deep breath and whispered to myself, this is for her, for me, and for truth. My hand brushed the linen handkerchief in my pocket, the echo object I carried like a secret anchor. Somewhere down the hallway, I heard voices, my mother's soft laugh, the clink of silverware, distant whispers. The house itself felt alive tonight, as if it knew what was coming. Fear pressed at my chest, but I settled it with resolve. If I faltered, they win by default. The line I draw now must hold. I tapped the Go Live button. My image flickered on the screen, greeted by flickers of light and the hum of expectant viewers. Good evening, I began, voice steady. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about visibility. I held up the letter. I read aloud. That house was yours because you were the only one who ever saw it as home. My voice cracked once, then steadied. I held up side-by-side images. On one side, a draft with my name. On the other, a version where my name was removed. Then I said plainly, I was erased from more than a will. From old family albums, I no longer appeared. That's no accident. That's erasure. Twist, S15. No sooner had I finished than my mother's face filled half the screen. She spoke from somewhere else. You're twisting everything, claiming you were cut out of your own history. My sister chimed in, calling me outsider, the troublemaker. Twist, S16. They painted me as unstable, ungrateful. I paused, held their eyes in the frame and said, outsider or not, I have truth on my side. Some viewers gasped, some stayed silent. A few sided with me, commenting, she deserves to be seen. Then something caught my breath. Behind me in the background, my father stepped into view, holding something small and familiar. The ring. Grandma's ring. He approached the camera, lips trembling. This always belonged with her, with you, he said quietly. Twist S17. The screen froze for a heartbeat. It belongs here, he added, pressing it into my hand. I accepted it without gloating, nodded to him, and turned back to the audience. I laid the original will flat on a side table, every scribble, every signature visible. This is not revenge, I said. It's belonging reclaimed. Twist, S18. Silence hung, heavy and electric. I closed the broadcast. The ring felt warm in my palm. The screen faded to black. When the live stream ended, the chat exploded. I believe you. She deserved this. Finally. My phone vibrated with texts. One caught my attention. We'll see how long this holds up. I closed my eyes, exhaled. The fight wasn't over. I looked at framed photos in the hallway. Now I appeared in them again, a presence not demanded but acknowledged. But I knew something. This was only the beginning. I walked slowly down my street in the early morning, the quiet hush of dawn around me. Some neighbors waved, quiet nods of acknowledgement, and a few turned their faces away, pretended not to see me. The aftermath of what I'd done felt like both freedom and fracture. The truth frees you, but it also isolates you. My phone buzzed. I opened it to find a letter from my aunt, my mother's sister. No accusations, no blame. Just, I saw you. I'm with you. My throat tightened. Later, I went to my grandmother's grave. I held the ring my father gave me, felt its weight, then placed it gently on her tombstone. The wind stirred the leaves. I closed my eyes, letting go of anger I'd carried too long. I let her name rest on that stone. Days passed with a silence so thick I could hear it. My mother said nothing. My sister unfriended me on every social account. The echo of that severance stung more than I expected. One afternoon, I found an old voicemail on my phone, my grandmother's voice, warm and deliberate. Be true to you. I listened over and over, letting it strengthen me. Heartache and acceptance coexisted in that loop. I realized then, I will no longer chase their approval. That chapter closed. Then, out of the blue, my cousin called, the one I hardly spoke to. She asked to meet. Over coffee, she apologized. She said she remembered seeing me edited out of old family photos when she was a teenager. She gave me a restored print where I appeared again. Her shame mirrored mine. In that moment, I felt seen. I realized maybe not everyone will come back, but some did. That afternoon, I was asked to speak at a women's circle in the local community center. They wanted me to tell my story, not to retell conflict, but to offer healing. I stood before them, steady. I spoke of reclaiming identity, of legacy and truth. I used a quilt metaphor. Some patches are torn, some new. All matter, all part of the design. As I spoke, I saw elders nod, cheeks wet, hands clasped. Afterward, the recording quietly made its way online. People messaged me, "You aren't alone. Thank you for speaking." The room held a gentle power. Empowerment settled in. Back home, I walked through my house as if for the first time. I removed a photograph of my parents from the wall and replaced it with one of me and Grandma. I set up a reading nook filled with her favorite books. Teenagers began arriving one by one for tutoring, conversation, refuge. I hung over my desk a framed quote, "Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family." The quiet turned full. That night I sat at my desk with my journal open. I wrote, "Maybe this house wasn't just left for me. Maybe it's where I was always meant to begin." I stepped outside into the garden and planted Grandma's favorite flowers. The wind brushed the curtain behind me, lifting its edge like a whisper. I turned. A shadow fell at the door, a knock. The story wasn't over yet.